I never considered myself the paranoid type. I always scoffed at people who would hear a creak in the floorboards and immediately assumed their house was haunted. For me, everything had a rational explanation, until I moved into the new house. I still remember the first time I saw it, a quaint little home on a quiet suburban street. It was nothing fancy, but it had charm: 3 bedrooms, a spacious backyard, and a front porch where I could imagine sipping coffee in the mornings. It was perfect. Or so I thought. My wife, Sarah, and I had just moved in a few weeks earlier. The place needed some minor repairs, but it was nothing we couldn't handle. The previous owner had been an elderly woman who'd passed away, which explained the lower price. But we weren't the type to let things like that bother us. Shortly after moving in, Sarah mentioned feeling uneasy in the house. At first, I dismissed it as the stress of moving and getting used to a new place. "You're probably just tired," I'd tell her. "It's an old house, it's bound to make some noises." And for a while, that explanation was enough for both of us. But things started to change, slowly at first, like a chill creeping up your spine that you can't quite shake off. The first strange occurrence was subtle. One evening, I was sitting on the couch watching TV when I heard footsteps upstairs. Heavy, deliberate steps, like someone walking around in boots. My heart jumped in my chest. Sarah was in the kitchen, and I knew no one else was in the house. I paused the TV and strained my ears. The footsteps continued, pacing slowly from one end of the upstairs hallway to the other. I glanced at Sarah, who was chopping vegetables at the counter. She hadn't heard a thing. "Did you hear that?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She looked up, confused. "Hear what?" "The footsteps, upstairs." She frowned, setting down the knife. "I didn't hear anything." She walked over to the base of the stairs and called out, "Hello?" Nothing. I stood up, grabbing the baseball bat I kept by the front door, just in case. I crept up the stairs slowly, every muscle in my body tense. When I reached the top, I swung open the door to every room. Nothing. There was no one there. I even checked the attic, but it was empty, as always. I went back downstairs and tried to brush it off. "Must have been the house settling," I mumbled. But Sarah didn't look convinced, and neither did I. Over the next few days, more things started happening, small things, but unsettling all the same. We'd wake up to find objects in the house had moved. Sarah's keys would be on the kitchen table when she distinctly remembered leaving them by the front door. My shoes would be at the foot of the stairs instead of by the coat rack. Once, we found a picture frame on the floor, face down, the glass shattered. And always, there were the footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps that seemed to echo through the house late at night. By this point, Sarah had had enough. "We need to get security cameras," she said one morning over breakfast. "Security cameras? Why?" I asked. "Because," she said, her voice tight with frustration, "something is happening in this house, and I want to know what. I want proof. Maybe it's someone breaking in while we're asleep." I didn't think it was that. There had been no sign of forced entry, no missing items. But I agreed anyway. If it gave Sarah some peace of mind, it was worth it. That weekend, I installed the cameras, one at the front door, one in the living room, one facing the backyard, and one at the top of the stairs. I set them to record 24/7 and even linked them to an app on my phone so I could monitor the footage in real time. The first few days were uneventful. The cameras caught nothing unusual, just us going about our daily routine. But then, about a week later, something strange happened. It was a Tuesday night, and Sarah had already gone to bed. I stayed up late, working on my laptop in the living room. Around midnight, I heard the familiar sound of footsteps upstairs, those slow, heavy footsteps that seemed to drag across the floor. I froze, staring at the ceiling. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. This time, I decided to check the cameras before going upstairs. I opened the app on my phone and switched to the feed for the upstairs camera. My heart skipped a beat. There, on the screen, was a shadowy figure. It was standing at the top of the stairs, just outside our bedroom door. I couldn't make out any details, It was more of a dark, indistinct shape, but it was human-like. My blood turned to ice. I stared at the figure for what felt like an eternity, hoping, praying, it would just disappear. But it didn't. It moved. Slowly, it started walking down the hallway, toward the camera. I could hear the footsteps in real time, matching the movement on the screen. My pulse raced as I watched the figure grow closer. And then, just as it reached the camera, it stopped. For a moment, it stood there, perfectly still. And then it turned its head, looking directly into the camera. My breath caught in my throat. I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. The figure's face, or where its face should have been, was nothing but darkness. And yet I felt it watching me, staring through the screen, through the lens, and right into my soul. I slammed the phone down, my hands shaking uncontrollably. I didn't dare go upstairs. I couldn't. Instead, I locked myself in the living room and waited for the sun to come up. The next morning, I told Sarah everything. At first, she thought I was joking. But when I showed her the footage, her face went pale. "What is that?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I don't know," I replied, my mouth dry. "But it's not human." We watched the footage over and over again, trying to make sense of what we were seeing. But there was no explanation. The figure didn't look like anyone we knew. It didn't even look entirely real. It was like a shadow, a distortion in the air, something that shouldn't exist. That day, we called a priest to bless the house. He came over, sprinkled holy water in every room, and said prayers in Latin. For a few days, things seemed to calm down. The footsteps stopped. The strange occurrences ceased. We thought maybe, just maybe, it was over. But then, one night, the cameras caught something even worse. It was around 2 a.m. when my phone buzzed with a notification. The motion detector on the upstairs camera had been triggered. My heart sank as I opened the app, dreading what I might see. The figure was back. This time, it wasn't just standing at the top of the stairs. It was inside our bedroom. I watched in horror as it stood over our bed, staring down at Sarah as she slept. It didn't move. I just watched. I wanted to scream, to run upstairs and pull her out of the room, but I couldn't move. I was paralyzed with fear. And then, slowly, it began to lean down, as if whispering something into her ear. I threw the phone down and ran upstairs, my heart pounding in my chest. When I burst into the bedroom, Sarah was still asleep, unharmed. But the figure was gone. We left the house that night. We couldn't stay there anymore. Whatever was haunting that place wasn't something we could fight or reason with. It wasn't something we could explain. We moved out a few days later, leaving everything behind, the cameras, the furniture, and even some of our belongings. I didn't care. I just wanted to get as far away from that house as possible. To this day, I don't know what we saw. I've watched the footage 100 times, trying to make sense of it. But some things don't have explanations. Some things are just wrong. And whatever was in that house, whatever was on those cameras, was something far beyond our understanding. We never went back. I never want to see that place again. But sometimes, late at night, when everything is quiet and the house is still, I think I hear those footsteps again, slow, deliberate, coming from somewhere just beyond the walls.